when we initially started selling the device, one question that therapists often asked was, how do I know if my client is going to benefit from a system like this? Like, how do I know that they're going to be responsive, whether it's to the audio or the visual or the vibration feedback? And so in response, we came up to this little app, and it's kind of like a helpful screening tool or a training tool, however you want to think of it. And so I'm going to walk through and kind of show a few of the different features. And this is a free app that we'd love to get feedback on right now. And so if you are interested in trying this out, either because you want to try it out with a family member or with a client, if you're a therapist, then please let us know. Namit will send you the app for it. We have currently an Android app for this, which would work on any Android device. And we're also in the middle of launching an iPhone app for it too. So we'll keep you posted on when that becomes available. And so what this is, and I'm just going to shut this off for now. All right, so I'm going to go in here to the setup. And I'm going to start with a simple way you can use this. So let's say you have a client or a user that's having trouble seeing behind them. Well, how do you know that the challenge is in fact that they lack spatial awareness? And if it was really just a problem of spatial awareness and they had a cue, would they be able to respond appropriately? And so here I'm going to go into the audio feedback. And so what I want you to kind of imagine as how you would use this is, say you have a client, you have a user, and you get them to do a simple maneuver, so perhaps backing into a wall or some sort of object. So they're doing this, they're backing in slowly. Now what you want to be able to do is give them a cue when they're getting too close and see how they respond. So let's say you see the client, they're moving in towards the wall and they're getting, within maybe that 1 foot mark. Maybe they need longer because maybe they have a delayed reaction time. So what you want to do is when you think it's appropriate, give them a warning. And in order to do that, you're just going to press the audio feedback. And it's going to give a beep that's fairly similar to our system. And so you might want to give them the instruction that, hey, when you get too close, you're going to hear a beep, and I want you to take your hand off the joystick. And you would do that, a couple of times and see if the person responds. And what that gives you then is an indication that audio feedback might be a good option for this person, that they would respond to it. And it also gives you the understanding that perhaps that is why they weren't able to stop before, or weren't able to stop in time, is perhaps because they didn't have that spatial awareness, and having this cue would actually help. So that's an example of how you can use the audio feedback. We have a very similar thing for the haptic feedback. Now in this case, it's actually the whole phone that vibrates. It asks the basic question to see if the client has spasticity. If they do, then you probably also just want to make sure that they're not going to have any negative reaction to the vibrations, because sometimes that can induce the spastic attack. So same thing, here you're mainly trying to figure out if perhaps they have sensation. Now, when you press this button, the phone actually that the app is on vibrates. So you might use this as a way to test whether they do have sensation. Maybe you want to place the phone in different areas, on their shoulder or in their hands to see whether they have sensation in those areas. Generally, we find that it's best not to dismiss vibration feedback altogether just because someone doesn't have sensation in certain areas of their body, because what we find is, even, for example, if the person doesn't have sensation in their back, because the vibrations do travel through the structure of the wheelchair, they might sometimes feel that vibration in another part of their body. And so we've had very interesting cases of clients who didn't think that they would feel a vibration because they have very little sensation in their body overall, but they were still able to feel the vibrations, perhaps because it was going through the chair and then their bones, and it was traveling to other parts of their body where they could feel. So that's the vibration. Now, we also have an example of visual feedback. So here, there are some exercises here, again, just to test how the person's, kind of what their awareness might be to certain visual cues. So the first step here is to see if the person can see the colors. So we provide similar colors as they would see on the controller to see, do they have any color blindness issues? So can they see the red? And if they can't, we could try trying out some different colors here to see if the person might respond to a different type of color. And that's really just to figure out if the colors are going to work. We have had cases where the person's colorblind and we've had to change some of these colors. So again, it gives us a good indication of how we need to customize the system so the person can better respond. And then it asks a few basic questions to identify whether the person can recognize what the cue means. So for example, if they see this red triangle on the left, are they able to understand that it in fact corresponds to left? And that's where the obstacle is. So it asks them a few questions like this, and if it's correct, then it goes on to the next question. If you answer wrong, so here it's supposed to be the right, but if I answer back, for example, it'll say, doesn't seem right, go back to try again. So it's also a way potentially to help the person learn what these things mean. So it's not just to, it's not a yes or no here that's saying, oh, if the person doesn't recognize these things or you don't understand what that means, that it's not going to work. It also provides a way to give the person more time, perhaps to learn on their own at home. So they don't have to be in a clinic learning this. It's an app that they can put on their phone or any family member's phone or their own phone and can with time learn what these things mean. And then when they're ready, perhaps try the system. So it's a way to, so if for someone, if you can think of that, maybe has a cognitive impairment, for example, they might not be able to learn how to use the system right away, but perhaps with some time and some training, they might be able to. All right. So that's just the basic setup part. And I'm not going to have time to go through everything here, but I did want to give you a quick peek into what the learning module looks like as well. So if I click on Learn here, I'm going to go to one is sort of a game-like simulator that I really like. So I'll show you that one. So it's for the visual feedback here. I'm going to go to the obstacle simulation, which the reason I'm showing this is we had a client who had a traumatic brain injury. And when he tried the system, it didn't really work for him. He wasn't responsive to the audio cues. He was still doing what he was doing. He was bumping into walls. And at that point, his family and his caregiver basically said, I think he's just not getting it. It's the brain injury, and he's not really understanding what's going on because he just keeps doing the same thing. And we had just developed this app at the time. So naturally, me being, the scientist that I am, I said, do you mind if I try a little experiment? And I asked the client to see if he wanted to play this little game. And he said, yeah, sure, why not? And so we ended up playing this game. And so what this is, and this is really was for me to identify where his cognitive understanding was. And so the way that this game is set up is whatever's in, so this is the wheelchair, if you can imagine the client's looking in front of them. The three red areas here are the danger zone. So that's left, middle, and right in the danger zone. And then further back is the warning zone. So that's left, middle, and right in the warning zone. This is the first level of the game. And here what it shows is what the controller might look like. So where it says it has a yellow zone here in the middle, all we want to do is see if the individual can click in the right area saying that's where the obstacle is if I see this feedback. And so here I see a yellow rectangle in the middle. And so I map that yellow to yellow. So it's in this area. And because it's the center, I would click on that square and it says correct. And I can go on to the next question. So now it's got the red triangle on the right. So because it's red, I'm going to map it to the red area. And because it's on the right, I'm going to map it to the triangle there on the right. And it says correct again. And so they can keep doing this in the current level where if you notice, because the colors are already mapped, they don't have to think too much about whether it's in the danger zone or the warning zone. They're really just mapping the location. But of course, once they master this concept, we can go to the next level. And here, now you notice everything's been grayed out. So there's no color cues anymore. So now the person has to figure out not only where the obstacle is in terms of left, middle, or right, but also how far away it is. So is it in that danger zone or is it in the warning zone? And so now if I see this yellow left triangle, it means it's further away. So it's going to be in that lower quadrant there. And it's also on the left. So I'm going to click on there and that's correct. So it was really interesting because as you can imagine, this is not a very easy task. There is a lot of mapping going on here, trying to figure out, okay, well, what area of the chair, how far, and surprisingly, the client blew through this. In fact, he had an even a faster time going through these questions and answering them correctly. He had a perfect score, but he also was able to answer them significantly faster than not only my interns who did this, but also a professor who I trialed it with. And so this really brought up a lot of interesting questions about, you know, what are we not getting here? You know, what are we missing? What are really the skills required to drive? And how do we break that up into, you know, the cognitive aspect of, you know, the awareness and the understanding, and then how that maps then to an action, so the cause and effect, and then finally to motivation and behavior as well. And so, and the role of motivation in creating the right behaviors. And so this was a very interesting case, because one other thing that I noticed about his environment was there was often a lot of blame and negativity when he would do something wrong. And, you know, and just my general observation of this whole situation was, this isn't really an understanding issue, because he just did a very challenging cognitive task. You know, there could be some issues with perhaps mapping that into an action, but again, he was clicking on all the right things. So we didn't think that was an issue either, but perhaps just not getting the right positive reinforcement when he did the right thing, or perhaps getting too much negative reinforcement when he was doing the wrong thing, might have been the reason, you know, why he wasn't as responsive. And so, you know, we've thought about this a lot, especially in the context of people learning to drive, and what the role could be of a game like this that could potentially also give positive encouragement when they do successfully avoid an obstacle. So these are all things that we're working on, but I wanted to give you a sneak peek of this. And I wanted to also kind of mention this as a potential tool where you can help in, you know, in your current, for therapists, especially on this call, if you're doing training and assessment with new users, this might be a really handy way of figuring out whether cues could be a useful addition for the person to be able to safely navigate.